Hello, my name is Joey Mikalakis. I'm a staff attorney with Greater Boston Legal Services in our housing unit. And I'm going to be spending a little bit of time today talking to you about Massachusetts Eviction Moratorium, Chapter 65 of the Acts of 2020. And in order to do that, I'm going to pull up our flyer with information on the law, which is available on our website. So let me pull that up. Great. So the first question that I'm going to answer is what does moratorium mean? It means a pause. It means that most evictions in the state of Massachusetts are paused and will be for at least the next couple of months. What happened is when the pandemic first hit in March and April, leaders in the state realized that housing had a big role to play in stopping the spread of the disease. It's obviously a huge threat to the health and well-being of our society. It's a threat that could only be contained if people had the ability to stay in their homes. And in order to do that, you have to have a place to live. So what happened was through March and April, the legislature worked to draft a law that put most evictions on pause, and the governor signed that law on April 20th of this year. What it does, as I said, is it pauses and completely pauses the vast majority of evictions in the state. Non-payment evictions cannot continue. No fault evictions cannot continue. And most fault evictions or cause evictions, which mean an eviction based on a lease violation saying you did something wrong other than not paying your rent, also cannot continue. The only exception is where there's a cause eviction based upon a lease violation or a crime that puts the health and safety of others at risk. And so that's up in the corner here, reminding you that you can only be evicted right now for reasons that have to do with health and safety. Another important thing to keep in mind here is that it pauses evictions at all stages. So that means, and I'm now looking at the upper right-hand corner of the form, from the beginning to the end. So if you're someone who hasn't yet been brought to court, maybe you haven't even received an eviction notice, you can't get an eviction notice right now. Again, unless the reason why you're getting an eviction notice has to do with that narrow health and safety exception. Courts can't accept new cases for filing or schedule cases for trials or other court dates. If a case was pending on April 20th, in other words, it was going on, it's also on pause. No new events can be scheduled, and the court can't hold a trial and decide who wins and loses. And also, really importantly, if you already lost your case or if you already signed an agreement and you originally said you were going to move out on a certain date, then your landlord can't enforce that. In other words, your landlord can't get the document right now from the court that they need to move you out, nor can a sheriff take that document and come to your house and move you out and pack up your stuff. None of that can happen right now. Again, unless the reason for the eviction in the first place had to do with this narrow health and safety exception. I think a natural question that folks might ask in response is, okay, so evictions can't go forward right now. What does that mean with my rent? Do I still have to pay my rent? The answer is yes, you do. Nothing in this law says that tenants don't have to pay their rent. Nothing in this law affects a tenant's duty to pay rent. So if you can pay your rent, you should keep paying, because what's going on is there's a temporary pause. But once that pause is up, and I'll get to that in a moment, then all that rent is going to be owed if you haven't paid it, and your landlord can enforce it again by taking you to court for an eviction. So if you can pay, you should pay. If you can't pay, the law does say that if you are a tenant whose lease normally allows for late fees, then you can avoid those late fees if within 30 days of missing a rent payment, you give your landlord a letter or something in writing explaining that you couldn't pay your rent and why you couldn't pay your rent, and specifically how it has to do with losing your income as a result of COVID-19. Another protection that gets you, and I'm looking at this part of our flyer, is that your landlord, if you turn in this written notification that you couldn't pay your rent because of the pandemic, your landlord can't report that rent payment to a credit bureau if that's something that he normally does. The state has actually put out a form that tenants are recommended to use in that situation. We have a link to it in this flyer, which is also posted on our website. Another question that folks might have is, well, I can't pay my rent and I don't know how I'm going to get the money to be able to pay my rent back. You should know that the state has a program called the Residential Assistance for Families in Transition Program, RAFT, that in a lot of situations will help pay back rent money of at least $4,000. Again, a link to how you learn more about the program and a link to the application form is on this flyer, which is posted on our website. One important note about RAFT is that you don't need to have papers, you don't need to have documents in order, immigration papers, that is, in order to qualify for RAFT. It's available for tenants regardless of their immigration status. It's important to note, again, as I've said repeatedly, this law is temporary. It's not going to last forever. Initially, it was passed with the idea that it would last until August 18th, but it gave the governor the ability to extend it up to 90 days at a time. And he did that in late July. So now the law lasts until October 17th, 2020. In theory, it could be extended again. I think it's hard to predict whether or not that will happen. We're all obviously hoping that Massachusetts, our case numbers continue to go down. We continue to sort of see things coming under control. But the good news is if that doesn't happen and there's a second wave or an increase in infections, then the governor does have the ability to extend it further. But right now, it's going to last until October 17th, 2020. The last thing I'll say is that this law does not just protect tenants, it also protects small homeowners, specifically owner-occupant homeowners. If you live in your building, and if your building is a single-family home or a multifamily home with 4 units or less. If that describes you, then there are protections in this law for you as well. Specifically, there's a moratorium on foreclosures. So banks can't start the foreclosure process on your home. Again, if you live in your home and it's either a single family home or it has up to 4 units in it. And beyond that, you can also talk to your bank, tell them that you lost income, including rental income, as a result of the pandemic, and your bank is supposed to give you what's called a forbearance of at least, or of no more than 180 days. And what the law says is that they're not supposed to move those payments like just to the end of whatever period they give you. So in other words, you get a 6-month delay, but then you have to pay everything back in 6 months. What they're supposed to do is move it to the end of the loan and also not charge you late fees, penalties, or interest, or report your missed mortgage payments to a credit reporting agency. So again, protections in here for tenants as well as owner-occupant homeowners. Thanks very much for your time. As I've mentioned, this flyer is available on GBLS's website, www.gbls.org. And stay safe out there.